guys, and welcome to the discussion salon. If you're new here, my name is Paul, and to the rest of my subscribers, thank you so much for joining. I really do mean that. It just blows my mind that people have joined. Okay, so this is I'm going to dedicate this podcast video, we won't call it, to a fellow YouTuber. I've spoken to him once or twice on panels, and he always seemed to be like a top guy, geezer to me. He seemed to be like a top bloke, very likable. His name is Triggered Limey. So I'd like to send my condolences out to his friends and even more so to his family. I don't know really what else to say. So I'm gonna dedicate this video to his memory. And just say, fly high, mate, fly high. These things are never easy to deal with. Also, yes, I'll just put a small dedication at the end of this video for him too. So, yeah, condolences to his family. Okay, so let's crack on and do this video. Let's see if we can try to do this. I've wrote the script down, so if you hear me stopping and starting, that's me reading the sort of script. I'm not an actor, I'm not a thing. I'm recently just almost at the end of a history degree at university. So yeah, so let's crack on from here and let's talk about this. What I've got planned. Okay, so we're going to go back into time into a quiet place in Surrey and we're going to go back to Saturday, the 8th of October, 1932, in Shackleford. A young errand boy was looking for work, and he came across his cottage. The errand boy's name was a Robin Uber, and he knocked on the door of an Albert and Annie Keane. Now, Albert was employed by the local manor house, Rodwell Manor, and he was employed as a farm foreman. He was notably a reliable employee, so he always turned up for work, and he was well liked. Him and his Albert and Annie were well liked through the village. So when Robin came knocking on the door for work, he obviously didn't hear anything, so he went through the scullery door, which led into the kitchen, and he was greeted by a dreadful sight. He was greeted by the body of Annie Keane. He seen that Annie Keane had fatal injuries about her head and neck. She was lying there in a pool of her own blood, and there was a meal for two set out on the table. And also there was a sharp implement near her body. Now, Robin went and got the police involved, but Albert didn't turn up for work that day, and they were worried because he was a reliable employee. So they sent their chauffeur to investigate Albert's welfare and where he was. They discovered Albert, and the police also was looking for Albert because he was nowhere in the house and his wife was lying dead on the floor. So they went looking for him, and the investigators searched the area and his body was soon found. His body was found in the Cutmill Pond, and he was found upright with his mouth just under the water. He also had head injuries himself. The corner where he was found in the corner of the Cutmill Pond, is midway between where Arthur and Annie lived and his work. And also, it was also beside the track where he used to walk daily. And it was only 30 yards from a farmhouse, which was the Cut Mill farmhouse, which was formerly occupied by a Alan and Godfrey Nobes. And at that time, it had been converted into a country residence. So, when the investigations and when the police said, they came to a couple of theories. One being that Mr. Keane murdered his wife and then took his own life. And the second was an unknown assailant killed Mrs. Keane and then waylaid to Mr. Albert Keane and then threw him into the pond. Seems a bit strange, that one, doesn't it? The local paper reported, which was a Surrey Advertiser, the police were inclined to believe in the first theory and later revised their thinking to a double murder. There was no obvious motives for these deaths. Another theory was it might have been a robbery, since Mr. Keane had not banked for 30 years and there was an unconfirmed reports of considerable amount of money in Albert's and Annie's cottage. Had been said that both Annie and Albert had no enemies in the village and were quite happily living together. Both appeared in their usual cheery spirits before their tragic deaths. Mr. Keane attended a cell in the nearby town of Guildford, and Mrs. Keane was visited by her cousin. The police then changed direction of their investigation to the second theory. They concluded that the attacks the evening before were found as a dish of, as I said before, there was meals set out and there was a fish. There was a fish supper. A dish of fish was present and left out. And after the inspection of the tiny house, they concluded that Annie was attacked in the scullery, as there was no evidence in the house of an attack or a struggle. However, they did come across some things that caused them concern. Their police did find 2 purses which were empty, some wooden chests which had been padlocked, but they'd been forced open. Sorry, like I said, I'm working for a script, so please forgive me. And they also found similar boxes in the house, but these remained shut. When the police opened the boxes, they had found they did contain money. This corroborated the stories about money being in the house. And the police did not find any blood around the house, nor a sign of a struggle in the house, apart from the scullery. And they did not recover any fingerprints that weren't supposed to be there. They did find, like I said, the knife which helped to cut Annie, to be in the murder weapon, and the knife was found in the kitchen. The police also started to believe that Albert was attacked on the way to work. Well, that does make sense because he was attacked on the way probably coming back from work from the evening because his dinner was present on the table. The Surrey Advertiser explained the police were looking into the theory that Albert was murdered in the evening due to his dinner being left out, and his lunch basket was found floating on the pond. The police also found a stick near the body, and they believed this could have been the murder weapon. They also found a brick in the pond, which they sent off for analysis. The police felt certain that both scenes were thoroughly investigated, and they did take photos of both scenes. But we have to remember that forensic photography was still in its infancy there, and it wasn't as good as it is today. These murders seemed premeditated, as both Annie and Albert seemed to be tracked down by the assailant. The police were puzzled about this, and they put out an appeal about the crime, and anybody with any information about this crime should come forward and speak to them. But at the scene of Albert's death, the police found some men's garments, a coat, trousers, and a felt Trilby hat. Now, it had been reported that the examination of the hat would have reached consequences in solving this double crime. The police, a police inquest was opened. The police inquest was opened 5 days after the discovery of the murders at Godalming Police Station, and was opened by the Northwest Surrey coroner, Mr. G. Wills. Mr. G. Wills Taylor. Sorry, I'm having trouble reading my own writing. And they found out that Annie died from a hemorrhage caused by her head wounds and neck injuries. And Albert died through drowning. They both came to the conclusion that both Annie and Albert died through violence, and the proceedings only lasted a few minutes. Suddenly, there was a huge break in the case, and a man was arrested, a Godfrey Knowles, who was 31 at the time, and he lived in the nearby town of Farnham, Surrey. Now, Godfrey was the son of the former owner of the Cut Mill farmhouse, and Mr. Alan Godfrey Knowles. Godfrey was, since he came from that, he was not unknown to the area and to the Keens. And he was living in Runfold, which is a small place which is near the town of Farnham. And like I said, his father Alan was the owner of the Cut Mill farmhouse, which is only 30 yards from where the tractor was used by Albert. And Albert used to work for Alan, so the two would have known each other. So Godfrey was charged with the crime, and he ended up in court in Kingston, Surrey. And he was not, sorry, like I said, and he was not put into the witness box during the proceedings, but instead gave a statement at the end of the trial, standing in the dock. Knowles said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I am not guilty of these murders. But when I was pressed by the police, I told them everything I know, and what I said is true." So he dismissed the prosecution case so his lawyer went and dismissed the prosecution case as weak and rotten, and also knock-kneed. Mr. Manley's Godfrey's defence counsel said it was impossible to suppose after Keane's arrival home. So let's do this again. So Mr. Manley, who was Godfrey's defence counsel, said, "Is it not impossible to suppose that after Keane's arrival home, there was some disagreement occurred between him and his wife? Then maybe Annie struck Albert on the head. Then, in a fit of rage, he fell upon her and attacked her and murdered her. Then he mechanically takes the road which he travels every day, and he reached the corner, trips over something, and falls onto those snags." Now, does this sound like a likely explanation? Does this sound incredible? Nobody knows. All sorts of things to support these suggestions. That is not incredible. Okay, so we're going to talk about the case. I did write the case down. So, like I said, Knowles was charged with the murders of Albert and Annie Keane, and he appeared before Guildford County Court bench on Friday, October the 21st. And he had been charged for 9 days on a charge. He was also been charged for 9 days on a charge of false pretences. The deputy constable, Mr. W.H. Bird, said he had charged Knowles on the previous evening, and he replied, "I reserved my defence." Mr. Bird told the chairman of the magistrates, a Captain E.H. Tuckwell, the papers are with the PPD, and he asked me to apply for a week's remand. Nobes was committed for trial under the conclusion of a special sitting of the Guildford County Bench, and which started in the Borough Hall on Thursday, November the 10th. Mr. G.R. Powling prosecuted on the behalf of the DDP, and Mr. Manley, instructed by Dave Watley and Barlow, who are now marshals, defending. Captain Tuckwell was the chairman of the bench, and he was supported by the Earl of Onslow. Okay. A Mr. J.H. Wenham, a Mrs. S.T. Lee Strictly, and a Captain L.M. Saint, Mrs. E. Prescool, and Mr. J. Short, and a Mr. J.S. Edgeler. Sorry for these pronunciations and names are wrong. I've just got terrible handwriting, and so I do apologise if there's any misspellings of the name or mispronunciations. And there was a long table which carried many exhibits, including 2 suits of clothing which had been submitted for blood stain test, and an album of photographs. Mr. Powling said the killer knew the habits of Mr. and Mrs. Keane, and the motive was undoubtedly robbery. Nobes was the son of the late Mr. Alan G. Nobes of the Cut Mill Farm, and was living in the Princess Royal pub, Runfold, and he was engaged to the daughter of the licensee. And on the 7th of October, he owed the licensee, a Mrs. Hook, £2, 50 shilling and 60. In a statement, he said on that day he'd been caught from Sandy Cross, which is in between Runfold and Tongham. In a statement, he said on that day he had caught a bus from Sandy Cross, which is in between Runfold and Tongham, to Shewlands Corner, where he alighted from the bus, telling the driver he would pay the fare on the return journey. He walked to Cut Mill, arriving at 5:55 p.m. Then on to Shackleford. The reason why he went to Cut Mill was to look over it in the daylight and to kill time, so that he would not arrive home too soon, as he had told the Hooks that he was working at a pork butcher's in Farnborough, Hampshire, and he would be late. Mr. Powling said that an examination of the suit Nose was wearing on the 7th of October showed 18 places on the jacket where there was human blood, and 24 in the waistcoat, and then another 24 in the trousers. There was also blood on the pullover and a trilby hat and a brown suit. Nobes had suggested the blood was a result of nosebleeds from which he had suffered. Ernest Blue of Wolston Road, who was the driver and conductor of the bus that Nobes caught, which ran in between Farnham and Guildford on the lower road, he said Nobes had said to him as he got off at Cut Mill, "I will square you up when I come back." He did not see him again. He did not see Nobes again that day. Norman Vasey, who was a gamekeeper of Hampton Seal, said at 5:15 p.m. on the 7th of October, he saw a man near Putnam Road, and he was subsequently picked out of an identity parade at Guildford Police Station 13 days later. The man asked where he could catch a bus to Guildford. Later, Later on, he saw a man by the edge of the pond and another man near the Gatwick entrance to Cutmill. Both were strangers, and the car was nearby. He watched them for about 15 minutes, and when the car drove off, the second man was in it, and the first joined him. He could not swear that the man he saw would get into the car was a person he had seen earlier. A William Hames, an engineer and foreman of Hookley Lane, Elstead, said about three and a half years ago he was employed by the defendant's father, Nobe Senior, at Cutmill Farm, and Godfrey was an overseer at the farm, and so was the dead man Albert King. He also worked there, and Mr. Hames said 18 months ago he had declined Godfrey Nobe's a £20 loan. Albert Sharp of Stoughton Road, Guildford, told the court on October the 7th he was a licensee of the Bricklayers Arms in Abbey Street, Farnham, and the accused was a customer, and at 10 a.m. that day he had refused him a loan of £1. £1 doesn't seem a lot of money now. It really is not a lot of money, but it was back then. And Cecil Griffin, a manager of a fishmonger's shop in Farnham, said he had lent Nobes £1 so he can catch a train to Alton. So there was a direct line from Farnham to Alton, and it's still there to this day. You can go and people can go and visit Alton. Alton's a wonderful place to visit. It's a nice historical village. There was a big brewery there and other little attractions there too. You can go and see. It's a really nice place. So if you in this area, go and have a visit. It's really nice. And yeah, like I said, he lent him £1 so he could catch a train to Alton. He had not seen him since, but twice before he had repaid the loans. The accused landlady, an Annie Louisa Hook, and she was the landlady of the Princess Royal pub, said on the 8th of October, Nobes had paid her £2 towards the money he owed. And she said he was never in later than 7 p.m., 7 p.m. unless she knew he was going to be late. And on October the 7th, he left the pub at 10 a.m. and she did not see him again until 10:30 or 10:45 p.m. She told the court, she said to him, You are a nice one. Where have you been? To which he replied, working late. Really? Working late? Okay. The next day, she had noticed that he wore a cap instead of his usual trilby, and she identified a blue suit and a brown suit and a pullover as his. On October the 10th, her daughter washed the brown suit, which was dirty and covered in mud. Her daughter's name was Gladys Emily Hook, and she was engaged to the accused, and she became engaged to the accused in February 1932. And Godfrey and her walked from Runfold to Cutmill, and it had taken them 2.25 hours to walk back home. And one time he had a car, and they went out for rides. On one occasion, they went out to the Keen's cottage. At the trial, a PC, Tom Roberts of Guildford, said he had made a detailed search of the Keen's cottage, and he had discovered the locks on the two wooden chests. In one of the bedrooms had been forced open, and two purses in the living room, and they were empty. And a chest of drawers in the bedroom that they found two smaller boxes, but they're both unopened. So when they opened them up, they both contained money. So they contained 8 3-penny pieces and £3 notes. Later, during the trial, Godfrey Knowles was acquitted of the murders of Albert and Annie Keane. And after a 3.5-day trial in the beginning of December 1932, The jury returned the verdict of not guilty, and Albert muttered, "Thank you," before leaving the dock. He was then smuggled from the courtroom, leaving his young fiancée wondering would she see him again. And she said, "Godfrey," let's start this. Let's start this again. She said, "Godfrey may decide to go abroad for a year or so, but of this you can be sure that I'll be here waiting for him when he comes back." What a lovely person. Nobes was believed to have gone to Australia, but whether he married his young fiancée is not known. According to another source, that again in the Surrey Advertiser, he attended the funeral of his younger brother Bertram, who was aged 42, and he was also the landlord of the Green Man public house in Burton, Guildford. And this happened on March 1946. And Bertram's funeral was held in the same cemetery where Albert and Annie King were buried. This case still remains unsolved. If modern forensics were out now, I truly believe in what I've read about this case, that Godfrey Nobes went and killed both Annie and Albert. It is strange that he was not working at the time, and he ended up with £2 odd to pay for his rent. That is an extreme amount of money in those days. It doesn't seem much, like I said, it doesn't seem, it won't buy you much now, but it was an extreme amount of money. And to have that with no work is a bit unbelievable. The police, like I said, with modern forensics nowadays, he would have been found guilty at the drop of a hat. But nowadays, them days, you couldn't prove nothing. So, I'm asking, do you think that Godfrey Nobes went and killed both Annie and Albert? Who do you think he killed first? Do you think he killed Albert first or Annie? It seems a very strange case that not to be found guilty on. It's also been said, I'm going to take this a pinch of salt, that Nobes had Masonic connections, and he used these connections to get away with the crime. So what do you guys think? Do you think Nobes done it, or do you think it was some other quiet assailant that went in there and robbed them? I will be doing a live about this next week, so I'll be putting a announcement on the community page, and we can discuss it in the live there. Okay. I do, guys, I do have a Patreon. If you'd like to come and join the Patreon, and it would help the channel, it would help me. Who's beeping me? Yeah, sorry, something's beeping. So yeah, it would help me. It would help with the channel if you can. I'm not going to force anybody to do it. It's all up to you. If you'd like to donate, it's a £5. It's just a flat £5. It's sent to me $5. Okay, so it's just like it's a $5, £5, and there's also a chance to win in historical books and or a monetary prize depending how many people I get. So yeah, so if you give something, I'll give something back. So yeah, like I said, there'll be a small dedication to Triggered Limian's video and my condolences to his family. Okay, so thank you all for listening. Please look after yourselves, be well, and You all take care now, and I'll just hopefully try to discuss a better thing. Find out on another crime. I'm thinking of going to Guildford for this one, so for the next one. So we'll take it from there. Well, look after yourselves, guys, and be safe and be well. You all take care now. Thank you. Bye.